Wallpaper is a pretty good metaphor for that year of my life. I was always covering something up. A hole in the wall, a bruise on my arm, the fact that I was in a dangerous relationship. I'm Anna Maria Tremonti. This is Welcome to Paradise.
My story is about what I went through 40 years ago when I was in my early 20s. I married a man who beat me. I managed to get out of that marriage within a year. But what happened to me followed me in the form of shame and self-blame, really until today. I'd heard the phrase coercive control before, but I didn't really understand it in the context of intimate partner violence. Coercive control is a pattern of control that happens in cases of domestic violence where the victim is forced into these circumstances by the perpetrator, by their abuser, to change their behavior, to react certain ways, to behave, to fall into line. And it's not unlike, according to the experts, a hostage situation.
Turning now to the ongoing CBC News investigation into intimate partner violence. We take a closer look this morning at the warning signs, one in particular, coercive control.
Friends and family later testified she felt trapped and frightened in her relationship. That kind of fear can be caused by something called coercive control.
It often begins, first of all, with someone who already has this violence in them. You don't bring it out of them, it's there. You may not know it's there, but it's already there. And it might be violence, it might be financial control, it might be emotional control. It's not one thing, it could be a combination of things. It changes with the person. And it can last 3 months, or it could last 30 years. But it is a pattern of control that not only takes away your control, but then you start maybe changing your own behavior to make sure that the person controlling you doesn't attack you, that leaves you alone. And then it can go to another stage where that person who feels they have control of you might be losing control. Maybe the secret gets out. Maybe you try to leave. Maybe you confront them. Something changes. When something changes, that's when the perpetrator wants to get that status quo back. They don't want change. And that's what's been identified as perhaps a time when it becomes more violent or when it can lead to an actual murder.
A mother of 3 was found dead in her Sherwood Park home. RCMP charged her estranged husband with first-degree murder.
13 other women were killed in cases linked to intimate
In the past
partner
8
violence.
months, there have been 3 homicide-suicides in Saskatchewan, leaving 9 people dead. The killers, all intimate partners.
This was the second murder of a woman by her husband in 1 week.
Pattern here that the majority of these women were either in the process of trying to leave their partners or had recently separated from them just before they were killed.
I realized that was me. I was kind of textbook, and it shocked me because I fit the pattern of that whirlwind of excitement, of getting into a relationship and then falling into sort of doing what he wanted to do and falling into feeling that his decisions about how I was treated were the correct decisions, that I had done something wrong. And it made me realize, even all these years later, that I really was in danger. Sometimes I would minimize how much danger I might have been in, but it made me realize that I fit the pattern.
That night, I look in the bathroom mirror and don't recognize myself. It's after midnight, and I have to be up for work at 4 a.m. So I put my keys in my pocket for protection. I lay my purse and my favorite burgundy boots next to me by the couch and try to sleep. If he comes downstairs again, I'll grab my stuff and run for the door.
So many of these situations end up in murder, or they end up in murder-suicide, or, I didn't realize this either, in cases of intimate partner violence, often the victim will suicide just to get out. That's how profound the violence is. That's how profound the injuries are, not just physical, but emotional and psychological. And so if you can identify this, if academics and criminologists and police and the people who work with victims of intimate partner violence can identify this, perhaps they can also find a way to intervene in a way to get the victim out safely. What the experts know now is that other crimes often begin with domestic violence. Jane Monkton Smith, who is in the podcast and has written a whole book on this, has cited research that says for mass murderers, their violence often begins with domestic violence. And in Canada, we need look no further than what happened in Portapique. That terrible tragedy began that night with an incident of intimate partner violence, and it was not the first time.
It was here in the Portapique area that the shooter made his first stop in a deadly path of destruction. Now, CBC News has learned it was also here that police encountered a woman with whom the killer had been in a long-term relationship. She had been forcibly restrained, but survived.
When this happened to me, the phrase coercive control in relation to intimate partner violence did not exist. Coercive control was not something that was identified with intimate partner violence until 2007. And it was then that people started to look at this differently. Until then, there were far too many people blaming the woman. We used phrases like battered wife, phrases like battered wife syndrome, which is still something recognized and used in the courts today. But battered wife syndrome suggests there's something wrong with the victim. Coercive control is about what the perpetrator, what the abuser is doing to the victim, and that's the problem. And so part of it is the way we've looked at it with society. We've tended to slot people into labels. We don't understand that you can be a broadcast journalist with a big career like I had. You can be a surgeon, you can be a judge, you can be a cashier at a grocery store, you can be a stay-at-home mom, you can be anyone. Because you're not the problem, the perpetrator is the problem. So once society starts to understand that, we can stop saying, well, why didn't you leave? We can start asking the right questions, as opposed to the questions that say to the victim, well, why did you make yourself a victim? So it's really key to understanding this at a very personal level, but it's also really key to understanding this at a societal level.